The text arrived without a hello or a reason. "You're not invited. My business partner doesn't like you." I stared at those words and felt the floor tilt under my feet, because 3 years earlier I handed over $500,000 and a promise that I believed in him. I did not plead, I did not explain, and I did not argue with a closed door. I scrolled through our old messages and saw months of need and not one question about how I was doing. Then I put down the phone, picked it back up, and called my lawyer. "Thank you for watching. It means more than you know. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I like knowing how far a story like mine can travel." My name is Mary, and I live in a quiet town in Alabama, where the cicadas sing long into the evening and the air smells like rain and pine. Life here used to be simple, steady, and kind. I was a widow for almost 10 years before all this happened, and I had learned to live carefully, stretching every dollar, growing my own herbs, keeping busy with the little cafe I helped run part-time. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of what I had built with patience and honesty. My son, he was my reason to keep going after his father passed. I believed his success would be the one thing that made all the long nights worth it. When he first came to me with his big dream, he spoke with that same fire his father once had when he talked about building our family home from scratch. It lit something in me, a hope that maybe my quiet life could mean more if I helped him chase his. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with those papers spread out, the sunlight cutting through the blinds, dust floating like slow snow. He told me it was an investment, that I'd be a shareholder, that one day I could finally rest and let the company take care of me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love, when given in trust, always came back home. I never imagined that message would come instead. Now, when I look back, I see how I mistook ambition for devotion. I thought I was helping him build a future, but what I really did was give him a ladder, and somewhere along the way, he decided he didn't need the person who built it. Still, at that time, I was just a mother, proud of her son's courage, happy to give him every ounce of support I had saved across decades of careful living. I didn't know that sometimes when you hand someone your heart and your savings, they can learn to value one and forget the other. I remember the day he first walked through my front door with that laptop under his arm, and those hopeful eyes that used to look at me over the edge of a cereal bowl when he was little. And he sat at my kitchen table like it was a boardroom, sliding charts and numbers and big words in front of me. And all I really saw was my son saying, "Mom, I think I can make something of myself if someone just believes in me." I had spent years counting coupons and checking prices, choosing store brands and patching the same pair of jeans instead of buying new ones, all so that account would slowly grow from a few careful deposits into something that looked like safety, something that meant I would not have to depend on anyone in my old age. And yet, when he talked, I felt that safety shifting into purpose. He promised me that the company would change everything, that my 40% would one day pay for a little house closer to the water, maybe a small garden and a chair by a window where I could read without worrying about bills. He told me he had a partner who was clever and connected, someone who knew the technology, someone who just needed capital and stability. And he made it sound like the three of us together were building something strong and unbreakable. We went to the bank, and my hands trembled a little when I signed the transfer, not because I doubted him, but because I knew what that money represented. Every late shift, every overtime hour his father had worked before that heart gave out. Every careful choice I had made when no one was watching. When the confirmation came through and the numbers dropped in my account and rose in his, he hugged me so tight that I could feel his heartbeat thudding against my chest. And he whispered, "I won't forget this, Mom, I swear." I held on to those words like they were another kind of contract. In those early months, he would send me photos of the tiny office with mismatched chairs and wires everywhere, his face lit by screens, and that wild excitement only a new beginning can give. And I would sit at my table in Alabama, smiling down at that little glowing rectangle, feeling like I was a part of something bigger than my quiet life. I told my neighbors that he was building a company. I told the ladies at church that my investment was not just money, It was faith in the future, and for a while, that faith felt justified. But even in those first bright reports, there were shadows I chose not to see. Quick messages asking me to sign something right away without much explanation. A rushed call where he sounded distracted and said, "I'll explain later, just trust me." And I did, because that is what I had always done. Looking back, I can see how the distance started with small things. An unanswered message here, a missed holiday there, tiny cracks in the closeness we once had. And I told myself it was just the cost of success. Not realizing that success built on someone else's sacrifice can sometimes turn into a wall that shuts them out. The first time I met the partner in person, he shook my hand without looking me in the eye, said "ma'am" in a way that felt like a door closing, and spoke over me when I asked about the budget. And my son laughed it off, said they were moving fast and I should not worry. After that, the distance grew legs. Birthdays turned into rescheduled calls. A Sunday dinner became a text with a late apology, and the simple question of "how are you" felt like it had fallen behind a wall I could not see through. I co-signed one more document because they said it would help secure equipment, then another because it would speed up a contract, and each time I told myself it was just momentum, not a pattern. On the day I brought homemade food to their office, the partner glanced at the containers and said they had a caterer now, then pushed a paper across the table for me to initial, and my son stood there with his eyes on the floor like he could not decide which way to turn. Driving home, I kept replaying small moments. The way my calls went to voicemail, the way gratitude had thinned into routine, and I felt a quiet ache settle in my chest that I could not name yet. I told myself to be patient, to let the company find its feet, to believe that kindness would be remembered when the noise died down. I did not know I was already standing at the edge of the message that would make patience feel like a mistake. I was ironing a simple dress for an investor dinner they mentioned in passing. Nothing fancy, just something neat that would make me feel like I belonged at a table I had helped set. When my phone lit up on the counter, and those words appeared without a greeting. "You're not invited. My business partner doesn't like you," and the hiss of steam from the iron sounded suddenly loud against the quiet of my kitchen. I stood there with the cord tugging at my wrist and felt a heat that was not from the iron rise behind my eyes, because it was not only a refusal, it was a revision of history. As if my hands had never signed the transfers, as if my savings had never crossed that digital bridge into their account, as if my name had been erased from the ledger the moment the chairs were upgraded and the caterer took over. I put the iron upright and watched the dress sag a little on the board, a small collapse that matched the way my chest felt. Then I scrolled back through our messages and saw the trail of requests, wire confirmations, quick thank yous that read like receipts, and not a single line asking if I was eating well or sleeping through the night. I thought of the last time he stood in this kitchen promising me I would never be treated like an outsider, and how easily a stranger's opinion had reached into our house and locked a door that I paid to build. I considered sending a long reply, something measured and careful, something that would remind him of the truth, but the words kept turning to ash before they reached my fingertips. And I understood that explanations offered to someone who has already made you small do not lift you back to your full height. I set the phone face down, turned off the iron, smoothed the dress with my palm, even though I knew I would not wear it that night, and in that steady silence, I chose not to beg for a seat. I chose to remember the agreement with my name on it, and I chose to breathe until the hurt settled into something I could carry without shaking. I picked up the phone with steady hands and called Mr. Collins, because there comes a moment when quiet respect must be guarded by clear rules, and I was done offering explanations to a door that would not open. He answered on the second ring, kind voice, careful words, and I told him what had just arrived on my screen: the dress on the board, the iron cooling, the feeling that someone had taken an eraser to my name. He asked me to hold while he pulled up the documents, and I stood by the window watching a line of clouds drift over the trees, thinking about the years that had filled that account and the trust I had placed in signatures that were supposed to mean something. He began to read the agreement in that even tone lawyers use when they want the truth to do its own work. And he found the line we both needed, the one that said, any dilution of shares, any transfer of control, any exclusion of the primary investor from important companies required written consent, which I had not given. And he paused to ask if I understood what that meant in practice. I said I did. And I also understood what it meant in my heart, because money may move through wires, but respect travels through choices, and the choice had been to set me outside. He asked if I wanted to be reinstated as an active decision maker, or if I wanted a buyout at the current valuation. And I realized that this was not about being seen at a dinner. It was about being recognized in the room where my name already belonged. I told him I wanted relief that honored both the paper and the years behind it, and I asked him to prepare a notice that said, plainly and without anger, either bring me back into my rightful place or buy my shares immediately as the contract requires. He said he would draft it now and send it before sunset, and I thanked him, then set the phone down and stood very still, letting the weight settle in my body, not the weight of loss, but the weight of choosing myself. I walked back to the ironing board, unplugged the cord, folded the dress, and placed it gently in the closet, not as a surrender, but as a sign that I would no longer dress for rooms that kept me out while spending what I had given to build them. Mr. Collins sent the notice before the light left the trees, plain words carrying all the weight that my voice did not need to raise. And I stood at the sink, rinsing a teacup, steady as the decision I had made. I was not chasing an invitation anymore. I was honoring the agreement with my name on it, and that simple thought loosened something tight in my chest. I sat at the table where I had once signed hope into numbers and let the room be quiet, because I had asked for nothing more than what was promised, and whatever came next would meet me here on level ground. The first hour after the notice felt like the house took a long breath with me. I rinsed the teacup and wiped the counter, then set the phone face down on the table and let the quiet do what explanations never could. Soon the buzzing began. A single ring that faded, then another, then a small storm that gathered and would not pass. Unknown numbers, my son's name, the partner's number I had never saved, and each vibration sounded like the echo of that text, turned back toward its sender. I watered the fern by the window and folded a clean towel, steady in my body, steady in my choice, and when I finally looked, the screen showed a stack of missed calls and a line of messages that tried to change the story with urgency. Call me now. This is not what we meant. Why would you do this? You're going to ruin everything. As if the breach were mine for insisting on the terms they had agreed to when the money moved. Mr. Collins sent a short note that said they acknowledged receipt, that a response would come quickly, and I imagined that dinner table where I had been told I was not welcome, chairs pulled close, glasses raised, a toast interrupted by the realization that paper has a memory and promises have a spine. I did not hurry to answer. I let the calls stack while the sky turned the color of copper. I reheated my tea and took a slow sip, because there's a difference between anger and clarity. And I had chosen clarity. I had chosen the kind of calm that comes when you stop asking to be seen and simply stand where your name already grants you the right to be. When I finally answered, I kept my voice even, and he came at me in a rush, saying it was just a dinner, that I had misunderstood, that the partner did not mean anything by it, and beneath the fast words I heard fear, not for me, but for the machine they had set in motion, without the person who had helped pay for the first bolt. So I repeated one simple truth. The notice lists two options, and I will accept either. Reinstate me as an active decision maker, as the agreement promises, or buy my shares at the current valuation, as the agreement requires. There is nothing to argue. There is only the paper we all signed and the respect that should have been there without the paper at all. He put me on speaker without asking, and the partner tried a careful tone that sounded like a mask, saying this could spook other investors, saying timing was terrible, saying I was forcing their hand, and I told him I was not forcing anything. I was simply stepping back into the space they had pushed me out of, while still spending what I had given. and that from this moment forward all details should go through Mr. Collins or be written clearly in an email so no one could pretend not to remember. The line went quiet for a heartbeat, then filled with promises and new versions of what had happened. But I did not chase their stories around the table. I reminded them again of the two choices and said I would wait for their formal reply. Then I ended the call and set the phone down with the steadiness I wished I had shown myself years earlier when I let small dismissals pass as nothing. Messages kept arriving. Quick apologies tied to conditions, offers of a future meeting if I would withdraw the notice, a request that I be patient while they finished the event that evening, and I poured a glass of water and watched the number of missed calls rise until it reached 55. A strange little monument to what happens when someone believes you will always say yes. Mr. Collins sent a brief update saying they were asking for a short window to arrange a buyout or to schedule a board action to reinstate me, and I wrote back that I would accept either path if it honored the timeline and the terms already laid out. Nothing more, nothing less. I made a simple meal and ate at the same table where I had once signed hope into numbers, and I felt something settle inside me that was not pride and not triumph. Just a deep, steady quiet that comes when you decide that your worth is not up for a vote. He came to my door before the sun was fully up, eyes rimmed red, voice low and hurried, saying I was tearing everything apart, and I let him speak until the words ran out. Then I told him I was not tearing anything. I was holding together what we wrote down when this began. And that respect was the first line of any agreement worth having. He asked me to drop the notice and trust him one more time, and I said trust is not a button you press when it is convenient, it is a bridge you maintain every day. And ours had been left to rust while strangers crossed it. He paced my kitchen, touched the chair where his father used to sit, and I felt my heart pull. But I kept my voice steady, two clear choices: reinstate me with full rights and real updates, or buy my shares now at the valuation your team declared last week, and we will both walk forward with clean hands. He nodded like a man who had found the edge of his map, said he would call Mr. Collins within the hour, and when the door closed behind him, I stood very still and let the quiet return, not as a punishment, but as proof that I could choose peace without surrender. By noon, Mr. Collins called to say their counsel had chosen the buyout path and wanted to move quickly. So I sat at my table with a notepad and wrote down every question that had kept me awake across the last year. Not to argue, but to make sure I would leave with clarity and a clean ledger in my mind. We met at his office that afternoon. Cool light on polished wood, pens lined like small soldiers, and the accountants walked through the valuation they themselves had announced the previous week. Numbers I knew by heart, because I had read every report they sent to impress other investors while forgetting the one who stood at the start. I listened without interrupting, then asked for the schedule of payments, the transfer confirmations, and a letter acknowledging the breach and my full release from any further guarantees. And when I finished, the room was very quiet, not hostile. Just the weight of realizing that the person they expected to be grateful for a seat had always held the deed to the house. My son could not meet my eyes for a while. He focused on the signatures, the dates, the neat stacks of pages, and I let that be, because this was his lesson to carry, not a wound I needed to reopen for him. When the wires cleared and the proof arrived, Mr. Collins slid the final document toward me and nodded, and I signed with a steady hand that did not shake this time. Then I closed the folder and pulled my chair in as if I were tucking the past into place. Not with anger, but with respect for the part of me that had waited too long to be treated fairly. Outside the building, the air felt different, not brighter, just honest. And I walked slowly to the car, thinking about the years that money represented, the overtime his father worked, the careful choices I made, the coupons and the secondhand coats. And I told myself, out loud, that none of that was wasted, because it had bought me the chance to choose myself in the end. That evening, I moved the funds into the account I had opened for a small house near the water and into a quiet pool set aside for women starting again after 50. And while the confirmations stacked neatly in my inbox, I made a simple dinner and ate it warm, not distracted. not waiting for a call. Just present in a kitchen that had held both my best hopes and my hardest truths. Later he texted to say he would try to earn back my trust, and I stared at the words for a long time before replying with a sentence that felt like a bridge built one careful plank at a time. I told him that trust is measured in daily choices and clear respect, not speeches after a storm, and that if he wanted a future with me in it, he would have to show me he could keep a door open without being asked. In the weeks that followed, I kept my days gentle and clear. I walked by the water in the early light and let the quiet teach me that peace does not need permission. I sorted old papers and kept only what was true. I set new rules for my time and for any conversation with my son. Updates in writing, respect in every word, no surprises dressed as urgency. And slowly the calls changed. Not to ask for more, but to ask how I was, and I answered when I had the strength. And I ended the call when my heart felt tired. Because healing is not a performance, it is a boundary you honor, even when no one is watching. I learned to enjoy small things again. The smell of bread in the oven, the soft light across the table where so much began. And when a neighbor asked how I was doing, I said I was learning to keep what I give and to give what I keep. Because dignity is not loud. It is steady, and it grows when you choose it every single day. In the end, I understood that love can survive truth when respect finally stands beside it. I kept my door unlocked for honest conversation, and I kept it closed to anything that tried to make me small. I chose peace over performance and boundaries over blame. And I let the future come slowly, one kind choice at a time, because what I gave was never lost. It became the strength that carried me here. Thank you for staying with me till the end. Your time means a great deal to me, and if this touched you, please subscribe so we can share the next story together.